Okay. Well, hello, and a warm welcome to everyone joining us live and to anyone who's catching up on this afterwards as well. My name is Phil Holdgate. I'll be the moderator for this session. Just a little bit about myself. I'm the Global Head of Production Sustainability for the ITV Studios Group. I'm also very proud to be the co-chair of the BAFTA Albert Sustainable Production Task Force. As per is the norm, a little bit of housekeeping first. We do have a Q&A function available for today's session. So if there are any questions you have, then please do use that function, pop your questions in there, and we'll try and answer as many of them as we can. Just before we start today's session, BAFTA Albert would like to thank our event partners, Sunbelt Rentals, as well as Albert's Sustainable Production Task Force for all of their support and for making this webinar free and available. Thank you. Whilst I'm busy thanking people, thank you all for taking time out of your busy days and joining this session, The Right Fit, Clean Power Solutions for Real World Shoots, where we will dive in and explore how people are choosing and using clean solutions as alternatives to diesel generators. Joining me to share their thoughts are some of the very best in the business. Really pleased to have everyone on the panel with me. Starting up with Neil Ashton, who is the MD of Pholex. Hi, Neil.
Hi, Phil. How you doing?
I'm very well. Have I pronounced your company name right, firstly?
You have.
Oh, thank goodness. That's a good start. Do you want to just explain a little bit around what Pholex does?
Yeah, we're a temporary power for film and TV. We specialise in grid tie solutions, getting everything on the mains where we can. We power everything behind the camera, in whether that be a small TV or a large high-end TV or film production.
Great, welcome. Great to have you. Next up is Louise Smith, founder of Neptune Sustainability. Hi, Louise.
Hello.
Hi. Just a little bit about yourself, Neptune.
Yeah, hi. So Neptune Sustainability, we are production sustainability consultants. So we work directly with productions to implement studio policies, Albert certification, decarbonisation strategies. So we're kind of the person directly dealing with the line producers and the HODs on the ground to try and put all of those policies into action. And we also work with several other agencies and suppliers to help with their own kind of internal and external decarbonisation.
Yeah, just a small remit then.
Yeah.
Excellent. Very welcome. And last but not least, Adam Baker, co-founder of Green Voltage. Hi, Adam.
Hiya.
Hiya. How are you?
Yeah, very good, very good. Thank you.
Great stuff. Do you want to just give us a bit of an overview of Green Voltage and also some of that freelance work that you do as well?
Sure. So I've been a co-founder at Green Voltage. We started up over 8 years ago, supplying and now manufacturing battery and hybrid systems for the film and TV industry, sort of to provide clean and silent power. In my day job, I still work as a hands-on in the electrical department, both in pre-production and on the floor, so I can see firsthand how we can implement better power solutions and how to keep our work efficient, but also be creative and safe and flexible, especially in our crazy world of film and TV.
Excellent, thank you. And I'm right in thinking you're joining us from slightly further afield today.
I am indeed. This is not a fake background. It's definitely a little bit warmer.
Fair enough, thank you. Great, really warm welcome to all the panelists. Thank you for joining us. Let's go. Okay, so a bit of background and context, I guess, is a good place to start. And for decades now, using fossil fuels in generators to power productions has been the go-to solution for pretty much everybody in our industry. But the unintended consequences that has resulted in some really significant emissions, as well as other things such as air pollution in the local areas where we're filming, and all the associated noise that comes out of those generators. But fast forward to 2025, and I think we're absolutely blessed in having access to several cleaner solutions now that just weren't available before. So everything from cleaner fuels, new technologies, and just more innovative ways of working. So the challenge, and it's a nice challenge to have, is how do we choose the right solution for your production? So we're going to dig into that a little bit today. And let's start with data. My favorite topic. I love spreadsheets. You know, if we're going to change the habits of an entire industry and move away from fossil fuels once and for all, then we really need to focus, or need to know where to focus our efforts and resources. And there's a saying that I use quite often. It was said to me when I first started in these conversations that if you can measure something, you can manage it. So Neil, I'll bring you in first if that's all right. Just how important do you think data is? And, what kind of insights can good quality data give us, do you think?
Well, it's really important. I mean, there's many things to look at with the data that you get, to be honest with you. I mean, first things first, if you're running on generators, you want to make sure that it's sized right. I mean, none of us wants to be that guy that underspecs a generator for unit base, right? So if we've got real-time telemetry on any of our installs, we're looking for min and max loads, but more a lot of looking for the trends in data really. So it removes all the guesswork for what we're trying to do. So what we sort of look at, let's give an example. If we've got a unit base at the moment, where we've got real-time telemetry on it, we can look at a weekend and like, what's the load on the weekend? And if it's quite high, there's a reason for that. So okay, let's if you left the heaters on, if you left whatever else on, we can switch these things off. No better way to save energy, right? Turn it off. We took a look at one of the jobs recently, and we saw that even at night, the base load was pretty much the same as the day. So obviously the weather's changed here in the UK, right? So we turned all the temperature thermostats down in all the trailers from 21 degrees to 18 overnight. We say you've got a 50% energy saving just by doing that, and bring it back up against 21 degrees in the morning. So the data gives us the chance to look at things like this and look at where energy is being used and what we can do to try and reduce it in its simplest form.
Wow, like live insights is incredible,
Yeah.
isn't it? And does that help? Do you think if we can start to build up trends, we can start to think about, what other clean solutions might be really suitable for those kind of jobs?
Well, absolutely, yeah, because you've got to look here. The seasonal weather changes we have here has a huge difference, right? So in the winter, like as we come into the next few weeks, it's going to get really cold. So heaters, it's quite hard to do a lot of energy efficient things when you're using such a huge base load. Then of course, our summers are getting hotter. So in June, July, you've got a lot of air conditioning that's running. So we can get trends for data for this and sort of look at okay, what can we do and what can't we do?
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. And Louise, on a more practical note, how can productions gather data in the first place? What sort of tools are available? Can you share any advice on what best practice might look like?
Yeah, so just following on from what Neil said, that Victron telemetry is, because it's live, it's continuous. If you can get access to that, and it's all well and good having it, right? But you need to take a look at what it's telling you and then take action and have those conversations and make those changes, whether it be the thermostats overnight and trailers or what have you. So I think we always will try and work with whomever we've hired the kit from, to get access to that telemetry ourselves so that we can also be another pair of eyes and respond quickly, and go and speak to whichever department might be responsible for those spikes, or like a really high overnight load that we can't quite explain. So I think in terms of the technology and that being something that is continuously monitored, that's super important. There are sort of smaller pieces of kit and older pieces of kit that don't have that, and then you're really looking at kind of manually working with whoever's operating that piece of kit. And that gives you the behavioral change piece, because if you're asking the person who's hired that Jenny to give you that load every day and they can see that it's at 15-20%, they're going to start to think, hang on, next time I order a piece of kit to do this lighting package or this caterer, perhaps I didn't need to quite get a generator this big. And it can kind of, they're seeing it for themselves as they go and look at that display on the side of the generator. Or they can see with a battery how long it's lasting with certain types of technology, so they can feel more comfortable that they're not going to run out of charge in the middle of a shot. So I think there's kind of that pairing the technology with just physically having eyes on these things on the ground. And yeah, best practice is to track all of your power sources, get odometer readings on electric vehicles so you can see and refine continuously, I think. And it's the response to that data that is important. It's all well and good having the spreadsheets. I love a spreadsheet as well, but you need to kind of have the conversation about the data afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, we don't just gather it for the sake of it, right? Fantastic. And I'm right in thinking, there's a couple of options if you don't have that telemetry built into a generator or potentially a battery. There are, things like smart distribution boards, clamp-on meters, that kind of thing.
Yeah, Phil, I'll dive in. Sorry,
Yeah.
we're fitting them on all our boards, 125 amp and above as standard. So it's going to take some time because we've got a lot of them. But you'll be able to dial in real time. Now, this is a little bit work in progress, I'm not going to lie. So it's I've been trying to give Louise's team access to one all day today, and So and it does give you that, and it gives you historical data as well. So this is a bolt-on to existing distribution boards that we've got. So it is available. You're quite right.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And
Awesome.
moving on to, I guess planning. You know, if we're going to start gathering more data insights, how can we work with productions early enough so that they can start to choose the right clean solutions for their show? So we're not always being reactive. We can be a bit more proactive. Adam, you know, do you think we can improve the way that we plan our power needs much earlier?
Yeah, definitely. I think sort of using a smart power lead or a smart power planner to kind of work through solutions, have a look at the everyday sort of operations. We know a lot of what happens and how it works. We know what craft are pulling, we know what other people are sort of pulling, and we can kind of work out some strategies around it. But at the same time, you know, we in the same sort of sense as the guys are saying, you kind of need to get that data, to read the data back and see what's working, see if we need to adapt some certain things to make them any better. And funny enough, speaking to Louise's point, the smaller batteries that don't necessarily have that telemetry, and we've just built one with Victron telemetry inside 10K. So we're just trying to help that smaller market as well, where the batteries need that information to come through. And we, you know, trying to keep the continuity of that telemetry all together as well, so we can all understand what we're getting back. Because there are all types of solutions that we can try with, but as Neil attests to, every setup is different. Every time we need more, and it depends on the seasons as well. But yeah, I do believe if we can get people in a little bit earlier to kind of look at the setups, look at the way it's happening, people that are kind of understanding how these solutions can be put together, it could be a massive benefit if we can make those suggestions a bit earlier.
Yeah, and Louise, we were chatting earlier around power planning meetings, right? You know, quite early prep stages with different departments. How are they going? Can you tell us a bit about that?
It's kind of revolutionary, to be honest. Everybody does tend to operate in silos. That, you know, the budget is in a silo for that department, the planning tends to be, and when you kind of start thinking about it more holistically and getting everybody who's got some source of power into the same meeting together with the producers who are deciding, yes, you can hire this piece of kit or not. Ooh, I see that this is clean tech, but it costs more. Once you've got everybody together, you can be more efficient with how you use that power across, you know, for onset and offset use. People start to understand each other's workflow better and become a bit more collaborative. And generally speaking, it's quite incredible that we don't do that. I do think we're still at the stage where somebody on the production, or at least a couple of people, needs to be quite keen. So convincing those people to give up their time and all talk together is still a bit tricky on some occasions. It does rely on a bit of goodwill, but I think we'll get there. And as you see how effective it is for everybody's workflow and everybody's day, it's certainly the way forward, I think.
Yeah, and actually just from sort of personal experience with some of our live shows, outside broadcasting, some of the big reality formats as well, you tend to have one supplier who's actually responsible for all of the power, and that seems to be more the custom and practice. So there's probably some lessons we can learn with different genres as well. A couple of you mentioned energy efficiency already, and I'd like to pick on that thread for a little bit. It's such a simple way to reduce emissions. You know, the cleanest power is basically the power we don't use, right? So, you know, we can always look at ways to reduce our energy use. Adam, do you think, or how do you think we can use less energy in the first place? What are the types of energy efficient equipment that we should be prioritizing?
Over the past 10 years, maybe a bit earlier, LED lights have come into the industry. They've made a massive difference. That technology is consistently moving. We're, even on the latest production I'm on, we're using brand new LED-based lamps that are as bright as a 10K. There's new soft and hard lights built into one lamp. So it's actually, you're not rigging two lamps at the same time. And the source coming off of those can save us using, huge lights. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's still the creative that we have to kind of adhere to, and we always have to be prepared to allow for that and the changes in weather. But the technology on the LED side is definitely making things work. This business of bringing batteries into the lighting world wouldn't have worked as well if we hadn't had LEDs and those opportunities to power single lights on the floor with smaller batteries and save turning on a 200 kVA generator. So that's also evolved. But I think everything as well, heating's become more efficient. The TV screens are not plasmas anymore, they're LED based. So there's lots of power savings across the board that help us consume and save a little bit more. But we all say it, the best thing you can do is switch it off. If you're not using it, it's just common sense. If you're on your way out, switch it off, and then you'll save energy.
Yeah, you remind me of my dad telling me to turn my bedroom light off, which we all should do, right? We can all turn things off. It's a really good habit, I think. And I've heard you say recently, oversizing of generators is really common still, for lots of different reasons. Yeah, but it's starting to increasingly be called out as being hugely inefficient. Can you just explain why that is? What drives the inefficiency for anyone who might not know? And I guess are there any quick wins? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, initially, generators always want to run in their sweet spot 70 to 80% so that they are using their fuel efficiently, that they're not wet stacking, which is unburnt fuel, sort of coking on the exhausts, and keeping it running at an efficient level. But we're also very aware that should we be on a set, we need to allow for every eventuality. If at the end you can be running no power during the day, and then the temperature starts to drop, the light starts to fade, and we need to have big enough sets to be able to power lights and stuff. But there are solutions around that. Again, load on demand setups, but that means hiring in additional generators. Batteries in certain positions can help peak shave. But yeah, there is lots of people be called out for it, and I work with gaffers and location managers, which are specifying to make sure that we are covered to be able to do it. But I guess there's a lot of, it's looking at the creative, it's kind of working through exactly what's going to be required that day and what we can actually manage to do, and whether or not we can downsize for 2 to 3 weeks and then bring it back up again. It's definitely, I appreciate exactly what you're saying. I totally agree. It's difficult because you never know from one day to the next exactly what the schedule's going to kind of dictate and where we're going to go and what we're going to do and how, it can change because of many, many, many reasons.
Yeah, we're not running a sweetie factory, are we? But you just never know what's going to come up next.
And it's a creative industry, right? We've got to kind of adhere to that, and we've got to move with it. We're not as lucky as being in the events world where we know what the concert's going to pull, we know what it's going to do, we can specify it to that sort of that range. However, as I say, there are ways that we can kind of try and play around this, and sometimes simply having a smaller battery setup on the set and powering stuff on the set saves us turning on that 100 kVA, getting our grid tie-ins and doing things along those lines where we know we're going to be in a good position. However, we've got generators and other bits to allow for the movement on location to suddenly change from one end of the road to the other. But yeah, that's kind of where we are with that sort of thing.
Great, thank you. And just sort of staying on that theme of quick wins, and if we're being a bit more efficient, then we can further reduce emissions and pollution, then with cleaner fuels as well. Louise, HVO is being increasingly used as a more sustainable choice. Just going right back to basics, could you maybe explain what HVO is for anyone who might not know, and why is it a useful choice at the minute?
Yeah, absolutely. So HVO is hydrotreated vegetable oil. So it's essentially vegetable oils and animal fats that are processed using hydrogen to remove the impurities, and then they are converted into a stable, high quality fuel. And this is essentially, it's a drop-in replacement for diesel. So if you have a diesel generator, a diesel vehicle, there's no modification required to the engine. You can have half a tank of one and top it up with the other. It's complete drop-in. So very, very quick win. It's really widely available with all of the usual fuel suppliers that, can deal with our, as Adam was saying, schedules that change last minute. Oh, actually deliver it to this location, not that one. So in terms of actually purchasing it, it's readily available with suppliers that we know and trust. It's got a much, much lower overall carbon footprint. So I think there's a couple of things to be aware of, and that is that it doesn't come from kind of virgin stock. So we don't want these plants being planted to create this fuel. There are issues with palm oils, but I think what we tend to do is work with the suppliers through the Renewable Fuels Assurance Scheme, and that's a certification scheme, so where this fuel is coming from. It should be kind of second use already is the idea. We don't want to start raising land to plant plants to that just doesn't work. So it's not a magic bullet. It is a transitional fuel. We know for the next few years at least, our suppliers have the kit that they have. We're not going to switch tomorrow off fossil fuels, but this does allow us to kind of take that immediate step. It's available now. It doesn't require any modification of kit. We just need to be careful about where it comes from.
been mindful of sourcing. Yeah, absolutely. And it's I don't want to labour this point, and we'll move on from HVO, but this is different to that first generation biofuel that cacked up a load of engines and got a bad rep, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Great stuff. And then, as an extension to that, if we've got a quick one there, is there maybe Neil or Louise, you want to jump in here around hybrid solutions, and that's where you blend a battery and a generator together. How does that work? Why is it more sustainable? Is that part of that transitional period as well, maybe?
Yeah, we've had some great success on this, to be honest. Let's use catering is a great application for a hybrid solution. So during the day when they're cooking, they're using a lot of power. Then at night, they might only need a little bit for fridges or freezers, So generators offload, maybe only be on 3, 4, 5% of its rated load. The battery can take over this and it works incredibly well. Craft service is another really good one. And even construction workshops and cabins when we're on location somewhere, these guys only use a lot of power in the day, and at night it's just a security cabin and a few other bits and pieces. We're now starting to see suppliers coming into the marketplace that have got roto-hybrids. So it's got a small generator and a hybrid. These are game changers. We really like them. They're great for craft and stuff.
Yeah, so they're integrated. Yeah, much simpler.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I mean, we've just started to introduce batteries into the conversation, and we'll come back to battery tech soon. But Adam, batteries only store energy; they don't generate power, do they? I've heard them called electrical generators, which I completely understand, but not quite right in terminology, sort of lingo. But given that they've got a finite amount of storage, maybe using less energy or being mindful through data how much power we're using, that's a really great mindset for us all to have, right? Makes using the batteries easier.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the name with the electrical generators and the hybrids and everything is there was a time when we were just trying to get people to understand that they can generate a bit of energy, or they can provide energy, and finding the right sort of word for people to get. But in the same way we talk about hybrids, and that could be involved in any type of setup. But yeah, they store the energy. Solar can generate power, but initially this is what you're going to put your energy in and use it. And in the same way that you'd fill up a generator with fuel, we're filling up a battery with energy. We have to be mindful of it in the same way when you're driving your car, you're watching the amount of miles that you've got. But everything we do in sustainability needs a strategy behind it. It does need a little bit of thinking. And I think, again, we have to go back to pre-planning and sort of looking at what we're doing in those areas, and also grabbing the telemetry and seeing what's happening on a day-to-day basis. It's being managed and it's working, and we're sort of a good sort of 5 years of bringing those bigger batteries into the industry now, and we're seeing it work, and we're seeing generators getting switched off a lot more often with a little bit more confidence.
Great stuff. And I guess a nice, neat segue into electricity and mains power from the grid being one of the simplest and most efficient ways to use clean power on a production. Particularly with the current UK government looking to clean up our grid by 2030, it seems really sensible to find ways just to make more mains electricity far more accessible for production teams. I can see Neil's eyes are lighting up now. But first, maybe Louise, if mains power from the grid is a really good choice, how can production teams go about finding grid connections if they're starting from scratch?
So this needs to start very early in prep. As the earlier we start thinking about these things, the easier it is to integrate them, right, with everything else. So before locations are locked, as locations are recceing places, we need to have them asking these questions, because ultimately they decide what gets put in front of the director, which eventually is where we're all going to go and where we're going to have to source this power from. So if those questions are being asked with location owners as the recce's are happening, so that we're all informed. So, is there additional available power here? How much is available? Is it 3-phase or not? What kind of connections are there that we could hook into? Are we allowed to use it? And if so, how are we going to pay for it? Is this a buyout in our daily rental fee, or is it going to be metered? Because that, again, coming back to the data, useful to know what's been displaced there. But I think just really early on, and I think my hope in the future is that perhaps if there are a couple of options for a location and one has accessible renewable electricity and the other doesn't, will that start to factor in? Obviously, we know crossing paths into what affects the creative is kind of a tricky one, but just raising the profile of how much less kit and fuel we need to bring if we just access the grid where we are. So I think it's just all about kind of building that into the way that we decide what our locations are and how we will use those locations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a vision of tomorrow that I can certainly get behind. Do you think we need a load of like dedicated grid cabinets, like the one in brilliant example in Victoria Park? I presume there's some hot spots around the UK that would really warrant that, but I presume there's other ways to access mains power as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in those kind of heavily used bases that we know we're going to return to, the Mall, people go to the Mall a lot, Battersea Park, Victoria Park, of course. And I know that other cities are starting to look at it, Bristol, Liverpool. So I think that the kind of that pilot scheme has certainly opened some eyes. And I know there's kind of movement towards it. Obviously, there's kind of the back and forth between, well, that's a static thing, so we still need that mobile power that we can bring to us, but the additional kind of benefit of these sort of cabinets is those mobile sources of power that go away from the unit base to set during the day. You've then got that security area where you could bring those batteries back from set during the day and recharge overnight. And so that mobile power and that kind of static cabinet actually starts to do both. So I think, yes, absolutely. Obviously, and Neil will speak more to this in terms of kind of permitting, safety, BS 7909. But there are other things when you're doing a temporary installation that is really important to factor in and bring in someone qualified to do that. When we're talking about kind of like temporary installations rather than a permanent one.
Yeah, some sizable power floating around at that point, isn't there? And Neil, just sort of coming on to you then, if I'm a unit manager or I run a venue or I'm a landlord, how do I go about installing some kind of grid connection? Is it challenging? Is there things people should be aware of? And I guess as well, one of the main questions floating around is it cost effective, or is it is it a sizable outlay?
Well, there's a couple of answers to that, really. I mean, if you could get a venue to put some C-form sockets in, whether that be a 125 or 63 or whatever, that's the holy grail, really. And that's we'd encourage any venue that has regular films coming in or TV series coming in to get some C-forms put in. It would be just get their electrical contractor to put them in, really. Failing that, we can tap into their boards. So any board that you've got anywhere, as long as they'll let us do it, we can drill a hole in the top. We can gland through, get a breaker in there, and we've made a fixed supply temporary. The regs are you're covering a bit of both. It's a fixed install, it's a temporary install at the same time. But we do this all over the place, and we tapped into a 4,000 amp supply recently and powered a gigantic production. So it's really from that extreme down to just a 32 amp 3-phase for a bit of construction power and some drills and stuff. Either way, it's easy to do. We've got one out at the moment. We've got a roto battery which is powering construction during the day, and we found a facility next to this plot of land that have got a 3-phase supply. So we put a temporary feed into there. We tow it back around, charge it overnight, bring it back, and in the day, and everybody's happy. So no fuel at all for the whole of the construction of the location, basically.
Love it. Fuel free. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And Louise, I guess more sort of practical resources in mind. Do you think some kind of, it seems a shame not to start building up a bit of a database. Is there any kind of resources like a map or something that shows where these grid connections are so that we don't all starting from scratch? Anything like that?
Yeah, I have to say it's something that's been on my mind for a couple of years that I have been thinking, let's make a note of that each time we return to a location or discover where we can use power and start pulling that together and sharing it. Have to admit, I haven't got so far. But absolutely, I think that would be an excellent resource. An example of that already exists is in Vancouver. So tie-in points, for example, I think at the museum, there's an art gallery that allows you to tie in. I think something, freely available online to productions would be fantastic.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. I'm just going to move on from grid and onto batteries quickly. As we've been discussing, they're becoming very popular in the production community, particularly those the small portable batteries that you can carry or move around on trolleys. But increasingly those larger battery units entering the market. And I know you, in particular, Adam, you've been in this space for a long time, a real pioneer for batteries on set. But for anyone who's maybe new to the conversations, where are batteries providing really useful already? What are those benefits away from purely just carbon emission savings do you see with the batteries?
Yeah, I mean, starting off with a smaller scale of batteries, it was always a struggle initially to get crews to use them and to change habits in the way that they work. So trying to demonstrate how we make work easier is obviously a winner before we even start talking about the sustainability side of it. The fact it's silent, the fact it's instant power, there's no need to run out cable. And we're always talking about locations and where we put batteries, but this also works on set. So, when a shot is tight and you've got something stuck in a corner, putting a battery in there to power that unit automatically helps everything that we're doing. But also, as I mentioned earlier on, simply using a smaller battery to save turning on a big generator, we don't necessarily get a chance to kind of capture that data because we wouldn't know that we would turn that on to use this smaller unit. So it's more sort of like within the community of understanding that that's what we've done and that's how we've made that better. But it's definitely more around the ease of use, making it more accessible, making these things switch on with a single button. And as I mentioned now, sort of capturing that data as well so we can see how well they're being used, see how often DIT is on a battery and they're running off of that solely, and they can turn themselves on, which they love, rather than moaning at us to site a generator and get some cable down the road and then when am I going to get my power? But there's the advantages of that. And then I think into the larger space, as Neil was talking about, hybrid operations, even standalone operations where you can get onto a tie-in somewhere, and even swapping units out, it's less fuel for us to move a generator and recharge it at a sustainable spot than it is to actually charge it off of a generator, to put an e-gen in there in a different space. But yeah, I think the main thing around it is, and also education. People need to understand why we're doing this, why it makes it better, why it's an advantage for us to put that battery in that space for everybody in a close proximity, but also the environment as well.
Yeah, and the performance of batteries is improving, isn't it?
100%. Yeah, when we started off, and the cost of them as well, they've come down nearly. Yeah, they've come down nearly 80% in 15 years. That's how expensive it was when it first kicked off. I mean, when we first pulled those first units in, it was a real leap of faith to see that this was going to work and that it was going to be an opportunity to make it work. But now, our original 2 kilowatt unit was a much bigger unit, and now it's a briefcase size unit. There's a lot more technology around running those batteries and making them more efficient. And also the safety element of them as well. They are not in the same safety data range as an e-bike or something like that. There's a much higher grade for these batteries. They're enterprise level. They're safer. They can move around. They can deal with heat. I mean, I'm in a desert right now with the battery setup, and none of them are overheating. Everything is kind of running efficiently with solar, and it's a real change for us to have a completely silent set. The sound man has never been so happy. So it's a really sort of good thing to do.
Yeah, he probably just heard you say that as well, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's 4 rooms over.
Excellent. And Louise, we've seen sort of those smaller generators powering things like video villages, craft, etc. Are you starting to see those types of technologies, batteries in particular, increase on set?
Oh, absolutely. And I think quite a few crew are now bringing that as part of their kit. They might have the EcoFlows, the Instagrids, the kind of 1 and 2K. Even the Wattmans are really popular. You mentioned sound teams. I know that I've seen many a sound team now kind of running off those Wattman batteries. So I think the variety of batteries is really increasing. As Adam said, the cost of hiring them is really coming down and making them a lot easier sell to the production. But also just the maneuverability. They're silent. Sound love them. You can, if you're filming in an elevator, you can bring it in. You're not cabling out of windows. You're not bothering neighbors. There's so many additional benefits. Or if you need kind of satellite power in many areas that are not close, you're not cabling from one centralized point. So there's just so many additional benefits to it that I think as soon as crews started to get over the fear of something different, now I've got to plan in recharging instead of someone from locations just coming and very quickly topping up a Jenny. Once that kind of workflow was figured out and the fear went away, everybody realizes how many additional benefits they've got, and that's the first choice now to a lot of people, which is fantastic to see.
That's amazing progress, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And I guess, Neil, that's where accessing grid electricity can really start to come into its own, like now, but also into the future. If particularly if we're getting larger battery systems, accessing the grid is going to be really important.
It is, yeah, it is. You know, echoing to what Louise said there, you know, the smaller batteries has just been a game changer. It's been absolutely brilliant. You know, just getting places to charge them all up. It's usually simple, to be honest, because they don't use a lot of power to charge these small things. Don't you know? They're pretty good. And you know, yeah, getting some mains on to get the. I mean, we've just you can actually use a if you've got like say a 32 amp three-phase main supply, you could have a generator and a hybrid battery as well. So the generator can really cover for those big loads, and actually you're charging the battery from the grid. You know, so it's that new next level of being super sustainable. What these things do, and it's we find it quite commonplace all over the place. You know.
Really interesting. And do you think, particularly for the larger systems, the more mobile, sort of larger batteries, do you think maybe public EV charging points could play a part in the future, perhaps?
Everyone keeps talking about that. It's something we haven't overly looked at yet. I mean, the holy grail for that would be to plug a battery into a Tesla charging port, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
You know? Well, you've got to tell the Tesla charging port that the battery's a car. So I think that's the problem.
We just stick a steering wheel on the front of it.
Yeah.
Simple as that. I like simple. Yeah, but I mean, essentially, we're talking about plug sockets, right? So, you know, in theory, it's something. It'd be interesting to see what part that might play in the future.
It'll come. It will come.
Yeah, definitely. I looked into it a while back, and because you know the idea of charging a 100 kilowatt battery in under half an hour from an EV charger would just kind of fix everything. There's definitely some complications around it, as there always is. It's a DC sort of setup sometimes, and there's companies that have worked on it, and the actual sort of the equipment's quite a large setup, but it's happening, it's coming. You know, if a car can do it, there's no reason why we can't be doing it in a much sort of smaller scale. Yeah, I'd love to see that happen. I think that would be a real game changer.
One to keep an eye on, perhaps. Great stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So moving on to green hydrogen, which gets a lot of attention. It's a clean fuel, it produces no tailpipe emissions, and the fuel cells themselves are very clever technology. People who've tried it are starting to understand some of its benefits and some of those practical limitations. So I guess the question is, are we, and this is a real hot topic of debate, are we about to see this huge hydrogen boom, or is it just hype, or somewhere in the middle? Does hydrogen have a part to play in the future energy mix? Louise, maybe coming to you firstly, you know, why is it called green hydrogen? It's a very specific term. You know, how is it made? What are those benefits?
Yeah, and that is a kind of an important factor you can make hydrogen fuel in several ways, and green is the one that you want to go for. So as you mentioned, that's kind of the 100% renewable. So if a product of hydrogen is titled green, it means it's produced using electricity from completely renewable sources, so wind, solar, biomass. So essentially that electricity is used to split water into hydrogen and oxygen through a process called electrolysis. And I won't go too much deeper than that because I'll get myself lost. But essentially, yeah, there's an electrolyzer in these fuel cells requiring that constant source of electricity through to separate those water molecules, and doesn't then start to finish kind of produce any carbon emissions. It does produce water, which we've had some nice reuses. We've managed to cable into honey wagons. We've used it. It's deionized water, so costume absolutely love it for steaming costumes, things like that. So we have managed to reuse the water that comes out of hydrogen power units as well, which is kind of really, really nice and circular.
Yeah, great. And you know, it sounds like a really, really clean fuel, so it's well worth considering in the right situations. Is it suitable for everyone? Are there sort of practical limitations that production should be aware of, do you think?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the technologies that I've certainly kind of been able to work with, it's quite large system, so that's to be taken into account in terms of how big is your unit base, where will it fit. It then, of course, also means transporting it is a bit trickier, although, you know, 3 years ago, we were looking at something that came in on a 60-foot crane, and they've now put it on the back of a truck, so you can drive it in. It also requires another truck next to it with the fuel that comes in and out, so you need to build in, you know, have you got a big enough turning circle to do that? And of course, not all unit bases have that. So I think the kind of practicality of the size and the logistics of it rules itself out in some cases. Or if you are moving every other day, that's not going to be the right solution for you either. But kind of slightly longer locations where you do, fairly rural or something like that, we've had entire unit bases very, very easily entirely powered by hydrogen. And it definitely does work. It's more expensive. The fuel itself is more expensive as well. So again, that there's going to be some kind of budgetary restrictions there on what types of production are able to afford to make that switch. Again, I should imagine and hope that it will go the same way as battery technology in terms of this is fairly new technology. The amount of hydrogen being produced in the UK is still kind of relatively small, but that economy of scale should hopefully bring the costs down over time.
Yeah, and it's something for us all to keep an eye on, I think, isn't it? Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that great explanation. And I've certainly noticed as well an increase in on-site renewables starting to make an appearance, particularly solar, emerging as a viable option. Sort of leaning into the pricing side of things as well. I read recently somewhere that solar panels are 99.9% cheaper than they were from 1970, which is a ridiculous, phenomenal cost saving. But are they really worth considering for the UK market? Is the question that I get asked quite a lot. Maybe coming to you, Adam. You've had some success with solar, I know. What options are out there with solar panels? Can we expect, UK with solar technology, given our reputation for that amazing, glorious weather all year round that we always get in the UK? It's never cloudy. Is solar great? If it's great in Abu Dhabi, is it also good in Aberdeen? I guess is where we're trying to get to.
Yeah, you had to go to Aberdeen, though, didn't you? It's not going to be easy to get around this one. No, I mean, the average household in the UK produces 950 kilowatts worth of solar on their roofs. We generate through solar farms enough to power 5.8 billion homes. So solar works. It's just finding the right environment for it to sort of take on. But whenever there's light, it's generating power. I think it's one of those, if you've got a battery there and that's the money, and as you said, the solar panels are not cheap, but they're way more cost effective. So if there's an opportunity at a unit base where you're already using a hybrid system and you've got 6 car parking spaces, then drop a 10, 12K solar array. If it's not going to cost the production too much money, which it doesn't, because also you can demonstrate that it will take a load off of it. On a brilliantly peak sunny day, you will generate 20, 30 kilowatts worth of power off of that. And we've demonstrated that before up and down the country. And it's definitely a thing which people are skeptical about because it's the UK. We definitely go through seasons. It is difficult to get it in there, but I think the cost outweighs itself when it's a long-running unit base, when it's a space that can be used for a longer time. Definitely pushing through Europe and areas like that, we've seen huge success with it. And obviously being here in Abu Dhabi, we're literally running off of batteries and solar only, which is amazing in a country that produces oil and fuel. But anyway. But also, then I think if you think of the smaller scale side of things, we do a lot of swapping out a 3K Honda generator that's powering a Wi-Fi system for a battery and a solar panel. And when they've been sitting there for 5 weeks and people have been driving around and topping them up every time, suddenly they don't have to revisit. So it's not just saving on the fuel, it's saving on the guy driving to the petrol garage and filling up his can and then bringing it back and topping it up every time. The Wi-Fi dropping out so that everybody's complaining because one of the points has gone. So I think there's definitely a use case for it. Again, it takes us to do a little bit of smart power planning to make sure that, you've got the space for it. It's like when we first start with batteries, we need to get people's confidence behind it. But people have got it on their houses. They can see during certain times of the month and so on that it does create. But also we've got to remember, it's free energy. It's the best bit that you can take. And even hydrogen can be powered by, but we've got to bring that all over. But if you could put that in, I mean, I've always sort of said I'm always surprised that the studios don't have more solar built into where they're at, and we could create a megawatt battery that could sit there charging up over months and months and take that out to location and be completely sustainable. But for whatever reason, we're not necessarily going down that road just yet. I hope that they will look into that and eventually go there, because for us to recharge off of those supplies would be amazing. Yeah,
that's another webinar, a whole other topic, but it's a great point to make as well. I know, I've certainly seen some lightweight panels start to make appearances on things like the roofs of facility trailers. I know we took some trailers out to the Shetland Islands, actually, almost as like a proof point to say, if we can make it work there, we can make it work anywhere. But what we found was actually we had really long summer days because we were further north in the Northern Hemisphere as well. So definitely got a part to play. And like you say, when we combine them with batteries, that seems to be the sweet spot. And Neil, sorry.
No, I was just going to say also the thing about the efficiency of a solar panel is actually they're more efficient when it's cold.
Yes.
So if the sun's coming down and it's cold, then they can generate a lot more. I mean, we're very hot out here and we're still getting sort of a 60-70% utilization rate on them. But there's definitely benefits to using it in long days and stuff like that. Yeah.
Excellent, good. So, which is counterintuitive. You think that hot sunny weather equals great solar, but actually the cold weather's great for solar, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
fascinating. Yeah. And Neil, I was going to ask you if you had wind, but what I actually mean to ask you is, do you think there's a place for wind generation in the mix in terms of on-site renewables? Because it feels like something that's not really been tested too much just yet.
No, we've got had a wind generator in development for a while, and we should have one going out on its first test in December. So it's basically, instead of solar panels charging batteries, we've got a wind turbine. But there's a whole world of problems that we've had to overcome with this, and we think we've overcome them now. So we're going out for first world tests. It's going to be a 5 kilowatt system. So we should be able to plug solar panels into it as well. So and we've designed this. We should be able to get more than one wind turbine, so we might be able to get several linked together. But this is still very much in the development phase. This is never going to give a huge amount of power. It's not, but it could be quite nice with just little pockets where you just want, I don't know, a cabin or a security hut or something that's in the, really in a remote sort of location and stuff like that would work really well. But we're going to do a bit of a social media thing on this, so we should be ready for December.
Right, check out your socials, everybody. Look forward to seeing it. Yeah, great. And I think the key word for the on-site renewable side of it is additive. It's part of a mix, right? So great to see we've got a few options coming to the surface there. I'm just thinking around, we've got all of these new solutions. What a great position to be in. We've got all these choice now that we never had before. I'm just thinking about like training and skills and, how can we improve the way that we plan to use it? Louise, what would you like to see happen in terms of people having the right skills and the right, what training do we need to develop to help?
Yeah, I think that gap, as you mentioned, is a big barrier. I think something new is scary. Everybody's running around all day. Everybody's freelance. There's not a lot of kind of what we call sort of psychological safety in this business. If you are the gaffer and you try something new and it doesn't go well and the lights go out, you might not have a job the next day. So that's a big ask of someone to take that risk on a technology that they don't know or understand when their career is on the line. So I think providing that support from the production and the studio level to allow, bring the backup as well, so you feel safe. And if as we kind of work through figuring this out, we've got a backup, making sure that crew member or HOD who chooses to go with that cleaner, newer technology is supported, and that it's not all on them if there's a problem. And just kind of creating the space and time to say, right, okay, we are going to hybridize your base now. Okay, the HOD from the facilities company doesn't feel comfortable with that. So, the battery company should come down and do that training, troubleshoot. What's the FAQ? If this orange light goes off, what do I do? I'm used to just having one, as you mentioned, Adam, how many buttons is it to get it up and running? How do I reset? How long does it take to reset? When should I start to panic? That I've run through my kind of troubleshooting. So I think making people feel supported in making that transition is a huge thing, because as we've seen with things like smaller batteries, now that people are used to it and they plan in at the end of their day to put things on charge, it's made everybody's day easier. It's cleaner and quieter. And once that fear of changing to a new way of working is allayed, it's great, and everybody will just do it as a matter of course. But getting over that barrier is not to be underestimated, I don't think. Yeah. And then I think in terms of how we plan for clean power and what we need to bring with us is we know that we're running generators for all different use cases, for lighting, for base, at about 15 to 20% of the capacity. So we are carrying 5 times the capacity that we need. So if you're thinking of bringing a battery in, for example, to replace a generator, you don't need to bring one that is the same size as the generator you used to book, because we're underusing the generator. So when you're kind of looking on the market to what's available in that different technology, we have to think about not the capacity of power that we're carrying, but how much are we actually using? Because they're very, very different things, is what we're learning from actually starting to really pay attention to carried capacity versus actual use.
What we're actually using.
Yeah.
And I guess that comes all the way full circle back to the data and the planning. And it's a cyclical thing, isn't it? Yeah. Great, thank you. And Neil, if we're moving away from generators and starting to introduce these plethora of new technologies, what are the competencies we should be gearing up for that nobody wants to blow themselves up. And electrocution is not a great look, and health and safety should absolutely always be the highest priority. What should we be thinking about in terms of having the right sort of safety skills and things like that?
Well, I think it's just about choosing the right contractor who's on top of the regs and stuff, really. I mean, BS 7909 has just had a revision, and it's brought batteries into it. And there's also, electric vehicle car charging points. Believe it or not, we sent a guy in a City and Guilds accreditation course a couple of years ago. 6 months later, it's out of date. They've done another one. So, the EV charging points are becoming commonplace everywhere now. And you see these cheap ones that people buy online, if they don't have what's called pen fault detection in them, and there's a mains problem, there could be all manner of problems with the car, and the chassis of the car could go live, and very, very unlikely that it could happen, but it could happen. So, make sure that, everybody's on top of the, this is moving really quickly, and, in 12 months' time, there'll be something else will come out. There'll be a new safety regulation for lithium-ion batteries or EV charging or something like that. So, and then there'll be something in for solar and probably wind one day and all these things. So, and what's the next thing? We don't know.
Yeah, it's, I guess the challenge is just keeping on top, isn't it? Yeah,
it is.
Great stuff. Thank you. And I guess just going to sort of finish off the formal part of the session, and we'll come to a couple of questions that we've got. But thinking about, the ultimate question, I get this all of the time, like, who's going to pay for this, right? is the question I got. So thinking about sort of finance and funding, and in particular thinking around how in a lot of instances at the minute, a lot of production budgets are really stretched right now. In your experience, Adam, do these I guess for the whole panel really, do these clean power solutions always cost more? Are they about the same, or potentially can we save a bit of cash? Like where are we at right now in terms of costs?
And initially, yes, there's from the cost of a generator through to a hybrid battery, but in the same way, a Ford Fiesta versus a Tesla, there's always going to be a price hike. But it's trying to demonstrate the savings that you make with this. And initially, we totally appreciate the budgets are set, and so that line of how much will it cost, how much will it save me? Can you demonstrate that? Can you prove it? And will it work? And it's kind of all of that, but also taking into account the amount of carbon that you save on top of everything, our duty of care to everybody who works in and around those generators for not breathing in particular matters and everything else that goes with it. But we are also seeing sustainability budgets coming in where there is, the leading streamers and so on have their targets to meet, and they've got their sort of demographics of things that we need to do. So therefore, this is great, and it's helping us do the right thing. It's helping all of us do our jobs a little bit better, and it's helping people get hold of these assets and getting confidence in it. And as Louise said, giving these guys confidence, not necessarily taking it from their budgets, but saying, look, if you can make this work, it's a good thing to do. And I think over the past sort of 5 to 6 years, we've seen a lot of changes happen within those productions. People are paying that little bit more to make it more sustainable. They're actually finding the solution profitable in some cases of saving at the end of it, and they're taking that data and actually using it in a sort of a positive way. We took a whole production in central London off generators for the whole sort of 2-3 days, and then we managed to demonstrate that it actually saved Like, just, I mean, it's not major, but they saved about 500 quid in total after paying for all the equipment and not using all the generators. The location manager said, I normally have about 14 sets around central London because I have to spread them all out everywhere to charge everything. And we've managed to not bring them in. He said, I've still got 2 or 3 here to back up what we're doing. But it's amazing that you brought the batteries in and you've managed to do it. And we still use big lights as well. This is like on the Union back in the day when we did it in central London, Louise. And it was like, it's an amazing achievement for us to do. But it did also take somebody like me and Dave Sinfield being there to go, swap that over, do that there. Don't bother turning that one on. Well, why have you even turned that air conditioning unit on? There's nobody in that tent. Let's swap it over. And this is how we're going to make this work. And we had a recharge strategy. We had a local tie-in. It was like, it worked really well. But it was our way of demonstrating with Netflix how it can be done and it can be achieved. But I guess it leads us all the way back to the first question, having that power lead there, having that competent person who can give confidence, who can say, look, I know it's within our budget and we can make this work and it will be a saving in the end. Is how we got there.
And the fuel is where we get the savings, right? So in certain circumstances, you can shift budget lines around.
Yeah, it's also all those unforeseen costs that we don't talk about. The transport of the fuel to get there. How many times they've got to deliver that fuel to top it up? The remuneration costs when you spill it all over the floor. The permits to park them. The all the other bits which we try and get together and say, look, you will save this. It's just, every time people look at a number, they don't see how much. It'd be lovely if you had another column that said, if you do this, there'll be this much carbon saving, and by the time you get there, you will save this much money. But yeah, it's difficult sometimes to get that through to the sort of commissioners and producers.
Yeah,
but that's why we have lovely sustainability departments to kind of champion those moments and push it forward.
Exactly, which is a lovely segue to you, Louise. Any final thoughts on costs and where are you seeing the real benefits?
Yeah, and that's exactly what we do when we're preparing with departments. Is we say, okay, we need to think about this holistically. The fuel line is nobody's real responsibility, but the rental for the tech is in the electrical department or the location department. So they're seeing this increase. But essentially, if you look at it holistically and weigh against it that those fuel savings, fuel costs money, fuel deliveries cost money, all of these things, and kind of re-pitch it to the producers as, you're probably going to spend this pound anyway. Do you want to spend it burning fuel or renting more efficient, cleaner kit? With all of those additional benefits, it's quiet, you haven't got to do the cabling, you're not poisoning your crew on a daily basis, the neighbours are not complaining because there's a Jenny putting smoke up into their windows through the weekend, which was exactly what we had. It was 3 weekends, and it helped us get the permits, didn't it? By switching entirely to batteries, we worked with locations to find that tie-in point for recharging, and the response from everybody. Locations were able to start half an hour earlier every morning because switch on was silent. So it made the days run smoother for everybody. There were all these benefits that we hadn't foreseen that made it work better. So I think it's thinking about the cost holistically. A lot of this technology does alleviate some of the cost, not all of it, let's be honest. I think, as you had mentioned again, there are increasingly opportunities like R&D funds that you can tap into at broadcasters and streamers, or funds whereby they might cover an overage in order for you to bring in new technology. So knowing about those and knowing how to apply for them. But also we will do a side-by-side comparison when we're doing, okay, you could rent this type of lighting or this type of power source. And we know now, because getting right back to the beginning with the data, we know what works now. We know how much fuel we can save if you operate this kit efficiently and really think about where you put it. And we can say, look, it looks to you right up front when you're just looking at the rental like this is going to cost more. But I can promise you by the time we get to wrap, and I've got 6 examples of where we've done this, and it's difficult because you're promising a saving that you can't prove until the end, right? They've got to pay this upfront money if they go with your proposal. But we are starting to get to a situation now whereby we can do that predictive modeling essentially, and that is helping. At least if you close the financial gap, it helps. You can't always completely eliminate it. And sometimes you can make a saving. So we'll try and leverage, we switched all those EVs and it's much, much cheaper to charge than it was to put diesel in the other ones. So we've saved you £5,000 there. Can we spend it on batteries for the locations of the electrical team, eventually, you're spending the same amount of money overall, but we've got two things implemented now. So it's kind of always kind of looking that one step up, I suppose.
Yeah, that is brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing your insights on that to the whole panel. That is it for the formal part. They're my questions. I'm going to open it up to the Q&A that we've got. So I'm just going to fire these out. Anyone who on the panel who wants to answer these, please feel free to jump in. I'm going to start with, I've got somebody called Charlotte who says that Louise mentioned taking a holistic approach to power planning. How have you found this working in practice when encouraging different departments to share sources of power? That's a good one.
Yeah, so once you get over the financial barrier,
yeah,
and the psychological safety barrier, then you've got the it's challenging, I'm not gonna lie. And I think it's knowing where to push and where not to push. There are certain aspects, for example, with the electrical team, we generally wouldn't tend to get involved there when in terms of like crossing over with what the locations team or the facilities team provide. It's about figuring out what are the stakes of adding on to what your power source is, and if the lights go out, then everybody's in trouble and no one can do their job for the rest of the day. So where do we want to start complicating things by allowing other people to source power, and where do we feel like it's managed enough by one competent person overseeing those things, that so catering and a facilities generator you might be able to combine, for example, but do we have one person who we know is checking then that you didn't add craft onto it, and then the Jenny trips? So I think it's very complicated still, I will admit.
Yeah, great. It was a good question to open up with, right? Great. We've actually got an international question here, which I'm loving. Thank you, Gisela, for that one. In Brazil, where I work, we are at the very beginning of this transition. When a generator is rented here, a generator operator is has the onset responsibility for that. But for batteries, so maybe, Adam, this is one for you. Who assumes that responsibility? Is it the electric department? What arguments can we use to convince the gaffer to take on this extra responsibility? Or even is it an extra responsibility, I guess?
I think when it obviously depends on which department it's in, and there's the locations team and the electrical department are the leaders in sort of power generation on set. But we've experienced that back in the day, and trying to get somebody to take the responsibility of making it work, but that means that we have to give them the confidence and we have to give them the assets that we know are tried and tested. And we've been lucky enough in the UK that we've managed to sort of tackle that and prove to people that it works. And everybody was a bit of a skeptic to begin with. But I think the ultimate responsibility, if you're more of a production team saying, right, I want you to use batteries, it's always an opportunity to start off small, giving people a couple of smaller batteries to say, look, if you could use that instead of turning the generator on just for the time being, we know they work. We know that, if you put that on there and it's 500 watts and you've got 10 kilowatts worth of power, it's going to last your shoot. It's going to make it all the way through. And I think and the education as well, I think, is really important. I don't mind going over to Brazil to do a quick sort of demo if that's what they need. We've been to Latin America before to kind of demonstrate a few things over there and to discuss how things can work. And because it's an amazing environment that could take on solar. You could definitely work over in that space. But I think definitely, even coming back to the UK, it's all about education. It's about kind of getting that demo done to give people confidence, show them where the buttons are, show them how easy it can be used. And it takes somebody to smell it, kick it, listen to it, not make a noise, for them to go, oh, actually, this is kind of good. Maybe we could make this work. I'd love to see like a little module at the start of production, like we do in health and safety, just to give people an understanding of what we're using, why we're using it, and the things that work. But yeah, that's I guess that's my answer to the responsibility side of who should take the rap when it doesn't work.
Thank you.
But it will.
Thank you. Yeah, it will absolutely work. Yeah, that's a good answer. Thank you. And that point there around, is there a little online module or something like that, answers one of the other questions we've had around, what more can the likes of BAFTA Albert and maybe some other of the sort of skills organisations do to support this transition. And I think anything like training and roadshows and things like that can really help build confidence. So That's
Definitely.
a great point. Yeah.
I definitely think, especially in our current climate of everything that's going on, I think sort of having assets to look at and understand why we're doing it, why we actually sort of make these efforts, why we're asking you to turn things off and do stuff, I think is important, because there's so much rhetoric out there, so many things going on that we can't get the correct message across. And I think if it's coming from production, and this is some of the good case uses, it's just a little bit more for us to say, look, we've given you a bit of information. It's kind of leaning you in the right direction.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. One of the next questions, actually, I think this is a really relevant one for a lot of people. If I am on a low budget production, and we've probably talked more around sort of HETV and feature film type stuff today, but if I'm on a low budget production, where should I put any limited budget or resources that I might have when it comes to clean power solutions? So straight away, I'm thinking, data, energy efficiency, but maybe some cleaner fuels as a quick win. Anyone want to pick that one up?
Yeah, I mean, we've worked on the smallest of budget things, to be honest with you. So we can always come in and try and get everything on the tied into the grid where you can. That saves you a generator and fuel. All you're really going to pay is just some labour and some cable and distro hire. And obviously, shop around. There's deals for small batteries, small generators, and stuff like that. It's all depends what time of year you're going to be shooting, I suppose. But there's plenty to do. Just ask around.
Did you want to come in on that one, Adam, as well?
I was just going to say that there are cost-effective solutions out there. Again, it's kind of using smaller things to kind of stop using bigger stuff. There's kind of solutions there that we can we talk about big productions and how we can bring in huge hybrid units and look after unit bases, but also I've worked on smaller productions and there are opportunities there to kind of save having to put the 7K Honda thundering away outside somebody's house because you wanted a 32 amp 5K to come through the window. There's now products we can use that could replace that and make it happen. So I think there's it's not fair that smaller productions get frowned upon because they have to have a generator because they don't have the finance to cover it or something along those lines. But I think there's now more readily available options that people can get their hands on and work more efficiently.
Yeah, and it doesn't cost us anything to turn stuff off, right?
Exactly. That's the ultimate goal.
Great stuff. I've got another question from an anonymous attendee. That sounds mysterious. Is HVO preferable over renewable diesel? Maybe that's one for you, Louise, if you feel comfortable.
They are essentially the same thing. I think it's referred to as renewable diesel in the US and Canada, whereas we tend to refer to it as HVO in the UK, but it's essentially the same product.
Okay, I guess coming back to your previous point, it's checking on the certification, the sourcing that's the important part.
The sourcing is the really key point, yeah.
Yeah, very good, thank you. The next question, will the power planning stages before a production begins principal photography create more jobs and roles in the industry that can help drive sustainability? That's a big question. I'm going to open that out to the panelists. Any thoughts on that?
I hope so.
Yeah, sure. I guess so. I guess again, it would be great to get a power lead in a bit earlier, to work with Louise's team, to work with people the guys know how to do it, they know what to do, and I think maybe that a little bit more electrical knowledge, even sort of from Neil's end, is just kind of saying, well, look, I think that'd be a really good idea if you did this, and have a look at that, consider that, and the way that this would work will give you this much power. Let me have a look at the lighting. Let me see what the guys are trying to achieve. Is it a night shoot? Is it a daytime shoot? Are you deep in a forest? Are you, you can kind of get a gauge on that. It's going to take a bit of experience. It's going to take a bit of training, but it definitely could create a job for someone if we can kind of convince the powers that be that would be a really useful position, a smart power lead of some sort. And it might be a hybrid freelance role that can kind of work with locations as well. Or even somebody that can go between productions, but I think there's definitely an opportunity there. And again, like Louise said, having that person there to give somebody confidence to say, look, I will take responsibility for this. I'm telling you, it will run that M90 for the next 4.5 hours. Just trust me. And if it doesn't work, then it's coming on me. It's not going to be on the gaffer. It's not going to be on. But this is the incentive that we've got, and we've been driven to kind of do this. So, let's try and move that forward. It's not easy. You should meet some of the Jenny ops that I know to tell them to turn their Jenny off and use that battery instead. It's it's an interesting world, but it can be done. It can be done. And I think there's a lot more confidence in the industry to allow for that.
Thank you.
I echo what you say. That, to be honest with you, it's exactly what we do. So just getting people to try and use things in the right manner, and look, we don't own any batteries, so we can advise, guys, this is a great option for you, or this, do this or that, and I think more and more productions are really listening up, and they're really taking advice of like somebody taking the lead on. This is how we're going to do this. And a great example I'll give you is recently we had a costume area that wanted to bring in a couple of dye rooms with 125 amp three-phase supply on them, so huge. And we had they were going to put them in an area where there was no power on site at all. The props area had a ton of power right outside their facility, so we swapped them around. And so just by getting in into the productions early, spending time with everybody, and if everyone's really up for this, and it was humbling to see that two departments were happy to move buildings. It was great.
That's incredible.
Yeah, great.
Okay, whizzing through. We've got loads of Q&A. This is fantastic. Thank you, Nicole. In terms of a grid tie-in, first question: what kind of lead times are we talking about in terms of planning? How many days, weeks of use do you think, broadly speaking, is necessary to make it? I guess what's the business case looking like? Is it a one-off for one day, or are you talking slightly longer term?
I think for jumping on that, it's I mean, if it's a one day, I mean, look, it's tough to justify the costs on that, because we've got to go in, we've got to see, some more often not recce at first if we haven't got photographs and stuff. But I mean, if you're somewhere for a week or more, you've easily justified a reduction in cost here, and justified cost for bringing somebody like us in to do this, because obviously the transport, your generators to come in, the higher your generators and the fuel. But tapping into the mains isn't expensive at all. Even the smallest ones, really. So it's a handful of £100 in some cases.
Yeah, and it doesn't cost you anything to ask the question. There might already be something
That's
there.
right.
Yeah. Great stuff. Thank you. Really great question from Gavin here. Have the panel had any issues with insurance and transporting particular larger battery units between locations? Anyone want to pick that one up?
There's an ADR that's come in that has definitely hiked up all insurances. We've always dealt with it as a Type 9 dangerous good to move it around, but we've managed to be quite successful. And we've moved batteries from the UK all the way out to Abu Dhabi. We've moved them where it sort of seems suitable. But yeah, there's new regulations that have come out around that. And as Neil mentioned earlier on, the regulations change every so often. But yeah, the ADR has sort of hiked up all transport insurances.
Yeah, no, it's a great point around licensing considerations for sure. Although I did hear somewhere that some of the Second Life EV battery units might be able to get around that. But yeah, want to keep an eye on. And like you say, it's constantly evolving. Yeah.
There's some regulations in there about the size of the cell and the amount of cells that there are and how you disconnect them. And so, certain batteries are designed in a way that you can disconnect the whole thing, so it sort of falls off of ADR regulations. But it's an area where we as a delivery company can deliver them under that ADR regulation, and then moving them around sets and stuff like that we haven't seen that become as much of as an issue for moving them between locations.
Yeah, great, thank you. Great question here from a supplier perspective. Lots of discussions around the upfront cost of batteries being a bit higher, maybe looking scary to those signing off on the budget. What role does the panel think that suppliers can play in supporting these decision makers? Can suppliers and partners sensibly navigate those initial conversations in a more effective way?
Yeah, definitely. I think providing data, providing as much information about the use of the battery. We definitely work with people that call us up and say, this is what I want to do with it. And we try to be honest with them and say, look, it would work in that environment. It wouldn't work in this environment. But I think getting it past people with a cost. Also, I guess you've got to recognise the production. You work with them to try and make it work for them, especially if there's a great opportunity to get a good case study with it. But yeah, I think it's a lot of, and we happily sort of work with them to try and produce some form of data that they can share and they can demonstrate the benefits of using a battery in place of whatever they're choosing to use.
Very good, thank you. We've got loads of battery questions, which is great. Somebody is
Awesome.
asking, yeah, I know, music to your ears, I'm sure. Adam, you've mentioned around batteries not really having too many challenges in very hot desert-like conditions, which is amazing. Have there been any issues in your experience at the other end of the heat spectrum, in particular where we've got extreme cold? My understanding is they tend to drain quicker the lower below zero you go.
Yeah, definitely. There is a difference in efficiency. We've definitely experienced some cold winters at home. There's, again, this is where we kind of let people know how to sort of start them up, to give them a bit of time. You know, coming in like a generator, you sort of crack that on and try and get it working straight away. There can always be a couple of issues, but I find that the cold is probably cold affects us a little bit more than the heat. Batteries are still really efficient in the heat, and they're efficient to a certain point. I think we lose about 10 to 20% efficiency in the battery range, which we then have to pass on and make sure people are doing their math correctly on what exactly is going to provide them from a power perspective.
Great. Louise, I saw you nodding along. Is there anything you wanted to add in? What can suppliers do to help?
Just nodding and agreeing.
You just agree with it. We're all agreeing.
But yeah, absolutely. I think everybody needs to contribute towards kind of making this work, don't they? And it goes back, as everything has, right to the beginning of providing that data, the case studies, even just what I've found really, really helpful is connecting people in the same job to talk about it. So I'm there with an agenda, right? I'm the sustainability consultant, so obviously I want them to switch. But if I can connect a unit manager with another unit manager, so as Adam was talking about the production that we worked on together earlier, we had a really, really great supportive Mark Clemson unit manager who, after that experience, I was able to call him up and just say, hey, I've got a bit of a nervous unit manager on my next job. Do you mind giving him a call and just sort of sharing your experience and kind of validating that nervousness to begin with, but also kind of reassuring to say, actually, when we got into it and we figured it all out, it was great. It saved me time and energy at this point of the day. The kit worked. So actually someone with the same stresses on them in their day and the same responsibilities gives that kind of like clearer feedback. So I think crew to crew, rather than sort of from the supplier side, can be really, really helpful in kind of breaching that kind of barrier that people have. Yeah,
that peer-to-peer knowledge exchange is really valuable.
He was brilliant, wasn't he, in the sense that we kind of had a detail of batteries for him to use, and he said, look, in the first week I don't know if I'm going to get my head around this. I've got 30-40 locations to deal with. He said, but in the second week I'm definitely going to give one of them a go. I'm going to try and use them somewhere. He said, but by the third week, I promise you, I will get something fully running off a battery. And now he's an evangelist. He's a guy who knows how to do it. He was a skeptic at first. He kind of got his head around it, and he saw that the products worked, and he just needed that bit of confidence. He needed, Louise's team to come in and say, look, you've got these to use, and you can use them wherever you want. Like, we kind of cover a little bit of that, but after that, you've got to kind of put it into your budget. And then it was like, having us in there to kind of say to him, look, this is what you can do with it. Don't worry, we'll check it out for you and make sure it's working. But he kind of took it and run with it himself anyway. So it's just that little bit of confidence, a little bit of demonstration, showing them where the buttons are. And, they led well and they did some amazing things.
Yeah, and why not to push the big red button that says do not push and stuff like that, right? It's,
that's the one. Unfortunately, the things that go wrong around our batteries is normally the people. It's not necessarily the batteries, but in the nicest possible way. But luckily, it's fortunately normally quite simple fixes if there's ever that issue.
Yeah, and we're all human after all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, brilliant question here from Rachel. Thank you for your question. Considering that many on units, on locations, and I guess just in any kind of production environment are really busy running around most of the time, are there any new devices being used, or maybe older ones that have sort of more automated, standby switch off settings, timers being used, things like that? Has anyone got any experience of that?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, with the timers on generators, we were using these 25 plus years ago. So it's quite easy to do and really simple. A standard timer, you can turn the generator on and off at set times, of course. We believe it. We used to do this on on a new housing estate, when they have a show home that's built before the power used to go in, we used to have a generator at the back of it, and he used to turn the power onto the house at like 7 a.m. And then turn it off at about 7 p.m. You know, because they that's from the age of time really. Now we've on our real-time telemetry, you can actually log in. You can there's a relay on there, and you can set things to turn on and off from your computer. So that's great. However, if you've got this real-time telemetry board that's being powered by a generator and you turn the generator off, you've just removed the mains from the telemetry, so you can't turn it back on again. So they're we've tried one with text messaging. You can send a text, which is really good until 400 people are standing around it. And you you send the text and you have satellite delay for 20 minutes. So there is a lot of these things around. We've got 32 amp 3-phase timers that we use for heaters in workshops over the winter time. So you know, so they come on half an hour before the crew get in, and we turn them off automatically later on. So there's plenty of them around, and we've got tons of them in stock that we can do. So it's simple to do, really.
Great, thank you. I've got a question here, I guess, around skills and competencies. Thinking specifically about sustainability managers' roles. How can we factor in competencies such as BS 7909? If anyone wants to explain what that one is on the panel, by the way, for anyone who's not sure, how do we factor that in and make sure we've got a sufficient level of electrical expertise? Or do we need, I guess the extension to that question is actually, do you really need a trained expert, or is there somewhere in the middle?
Call
Do you
us.
want to pick that one? What? Yeah, call Pholex, right? Yeah. For anyone who might not be able to do that, yeah. What is can you explain what BS 7909 is in particular? Because that's what the question is. And you know, is that sufficient level of electrical expertise, maybe to at least guide productions in the right direction?
Yeah, so BS 7909 is the temporary electrical supplies regulations. It is not a standalone qualification. If somebody has just been and done a 7909 course, they are not a qualified electrician. You've got to be really clear on that. So it's actually a bolt on. So if somebody is a qualified electrician, they can bolt this onto their training course. Now, many people go on these courses because it does give an awareness of temporary electrical supplies and stuff, really. But it can be quite misleading if somebody does turn around and say, "Hey, I'm qualified in temporary electrics." No, you're not. It's not a qualification. It's a British standard. So it came in many years ago when really to like try and tidy up the events industry quite a few years ago, and it's changed its guise quite a bit. But it's we pretty much know it back to front. Obviously, so it's not that complex, but it does give a lot of advice. But I do recommend if any sustainability people go and do the course, it is worthwhile doing. You know.
Great, thank you. And just looking at the time, this is probably going to be our last question. Again, another battery question. Panelists aware of developments in salt batteries. So these are sodium batteries. They seem to be an interesting alternative, particularly thinking about resources and availability and value chain and life cycle analysis. But it's gone a little bit quiet recently. I know there's been kits such as the Salty Dogs, the one that got quite a lot of headlines. Any experience in the team with sodium batteries?
I definitely looked into them from lifespan, sustainability, and all the sort of safety around them. It's just it was a cost perspective that would obviously cause the issue, and the scale and size of them. Again, this is an industry where, yeah, mate, that's a bit too heavy. Really, I don't want to use that. I want to use that one instead because it's really light. And it's like, I try to get people to test the Anton Bauer battery out, and it's 3 kilowatt. You can charge it and discharge it at the same time. Yeah, but it's a bit heavy, mate. Yeah, but it's only a little bit heavier than the Instagrid. Yeah, but it's nice to sit on, but otherwise. So it's difficult because it's larger and bigger, and that, people are using their eyes before they start thinking about the practicality of what they can do. And I think there's a lot to play with. Nice and easy, make it easy, make it a benefit to use. And unfortunately, the sodium batteries are just a bit too big at the moment and a bit too costly. It'd be hard to kind of get revenue back on that to put them into the market. And that's where it is. And and I talked to the Anton Bauer guys about that as well, and they knew that, and that's why they've come back with a couple of other options.
Great, thank you. That's really insightful. I think we are just about out of time. I've got one last question, which is not on the Q&A for you all. I'm going to whiz around the screen really quickly. Short and quick, how quickly can we move away from fossil fuels? I'm going to start with you, Louise.
Ooh, the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
I mean, and we're all kind of aiming for 2030, aren't we? But as we're coming to the end of 2025, that does make me nervous. I think kind of referring back to the fuel project, the shift report, we can see that it is possible. It is going to cost, I think it was around 12 million, which, you can make a small independent movie for that, just one. So really, as an industry, we know it is possible. We need to be very mindful of our supply chain, I think. We've got a lot of small niche suppliers that are very, very important to us, that we just need to be sure that it's just and equitable when we do that, and that we're not leaving them behind. Because the investment cycle of a smaller supplier needs to be what it is. They can't take the loss there. So I think that there's various things to think about, but let's aim for 2030.
We'll get the collection tin out. But yeah, it's a great point. Yeah, let's support the supply chain on that journey. Adam, how quick can we wean ourselves off diesel?
I think we're definitely sort of galloping towards having much bigger supplies from sustainable solutions. There's a lot more. The grid is the cleanest it's ever been at 58%. So if we're taking that energy and closing that gap of bringing that to site, again, it's sort of fighting cost and practicality of getting stuff on there. But I think, technology is going in the right direction. The costs are going in the right direction. It's a big leap. It's a leap of faith, and also not to lose my job, but also it's got to come from creative as well, from the top end. It's like, we need to see more realistic opportunities to kind of make that work. And, in the nicest way, we love creativity. We've got to take people on a journey with these productions and these films, but maybe there are some simpler ways that are not so heavy on production. However, I'm not exactly going to step up and tell the next creator of Bond where he should put his movie and how he should make it. But I think there's definitely opportunities to get us into some net zero productions.
Fair point. Neil, 10 seconds. How quick?
I think we're running at 100 mile an hour here. I think the industry's changing so quickly. I mean, look, from a couple of years ago, we had hardly anything to look where we are now. Look where we're going to be in another 2 years. I think it's going to move really quickly. I couldn't tell you when.
So exciting. Look, Adam, Neil, Louise, thank you so much for being brilliant panelists. Like I say, we're absolutely blessed to have your experience. So thank you for being so kind with your time. Thank you for everyone for watching and tuning in. And thank you to Sunbelt Rentals for sponsoring this. And thank you to BAFTA Albert for hosting. Have a good evening, everyone. Thanks.